Hey guys, good evening. Welcome to, I don't know, I think it's maybe the fifth episode in a row here. We've gone 5 episodes in a row of BMX Coach Live here on YouTube. And I am so grateful for the opportunity to be your coach and help you guys out with BMX racing and training performance today. I'm your host, Greg Romero, ex professional, ex Olympic coach. Well, I guess I can always coach at the Olympics, right? Anyways, I'm here for you guys here today. I'm your coach right now, and that's all that matters. So, today we're going to talk about how crank length will either make you faster or will make you slower. What do you say? We'll go deep into crank length talks and let's see what we can learn. Let's see how our discussion goes here in the super chat. As you guys know, I have the super chat on. So the super chat is basically an opportunity for you to ask any questions. If you would like, you could donate to the channel just by simply activating the super chat. It'll highlight your question, and I'll be sure to get to your question and make it a priority to answer it. As you may know, we get tons of questions at the end towards the Ask Coach G section. And there's been many times where I haven't been able to get every question answered. So if you kindly do donate to the channel, we're grateful for the opportunity to help you. But more importantly, we're grateful for the donation as it helps us with basically all the housekeeping that it takes to run this channel here on YouTube. If anyone does donate to the channel, we will give you a free digital download DVD from our store, your choice, valued around $30. So let us know. And what else do we have on tap today? Let's see here. Yeah, it looks like we're starting to begin quarter 4 of racing here in the United States. And looks like we have a few races left. The ABA, or please forgive me, the USA BMX Grands is coming up in November. I think we're about around 13 to 14 weeks. If anyone can let me know what exactly that number is. I think we're about 13, 14 weeks away from that. And so that should be really, really interesting. Especially with the pro title, right? Did you guys hear what's going on with the pro title? Basically, the pros, all the points are pretty much canceled, right? Well, I don't know. Maybe there was 1 or 2 pro races, but basically for the title, for the chase for the winning pro titles, right? The pro titles are going to be awarded based upon your position on the day of the grands. And that's pretty exciting. There's no points involved. So that means, 50 people sign up, 50 people conceivably have a chance to win the title. I know defending champion in terms of the elite men, Connor Fields, he's excited about the opportunity, but more importantly, if you really think about it, it's really different when you have accumulated points and you've established yourself as one of the guys in contention for the title versus, and of course there might be maybe 2 or 3 other guys. Historically, it seems like there's always at least 2 people that are mathematically in contention for the title. So it's really interesting that everyone that makes that final main event is in contention for the title, and I really think that's extraordinary. Yeah, I think it's crazy. So, I got my water, I got some snacks. We're gonna go probably, till 6:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time here in San Diego, California. If you're watching on the East Coast, good evening. If you're still here on the West Coast, good afternoon. If you're in Hawaii, good afternoon. If you're in Australia, I think it might be still good morning. And then if you're in Europe, you're probably sleeping. And if you're here watching, man, that's crazy. Yeah, I'm over here looking at the live chat, and man, awesome. David Burt donated $5 to the channel, and he asked a question. Thank you, David. You're gonna get a free digital download of your choice. Make sure you email me info@bmxtraining.com. I'll be sure to reach out to you guys. Anyone that donates to the chat, I'll reach out to you guys. Email me. We'll make it happen. I'll make sure I get you exactly what you want, and also get your question answered. So I think we're pretty much ready to go. Stream looks healthy. camera's working, everything's in focus. It's, internet's working really good. I plugged in an Ethernet cable, which is really, really helpful. When you do these live streams, man, I mean, just about everything and anything that can go wrong will go wrong. I've done a lot of streaming in Facebook, and I've worked out a lot of my issues there. And so, again, I'm really grateful for the opportunity to be here and be your coach and help you with your BMX racing training and performance. So, shall we? Should we get started? All right. So I think today what we're going to talk about is crank length. Does it matter? And I was thinking about it before I got on the show here. I actually went out and did a 20-minute ride on my road bike to spin on my legs and kind of clear my head. And there's definitely a difference between, say, a 13 and over rider who's moving into what we would call standard parts. Standard parts meaning, a pro size bike with regular 20-inch wheels. Anything below that, if you're a 12 and under, you're still going through these phases of growing and getting faster and getting stronger, and the crank length actually, it's like changing, like especially between the ages of like 8 and 11. You can conceivably go through a couple different crank lengths in a season depending on how fast you grow. I know I've had some seasons where I've grown rapidly and have had to go through a couple different crank length changes. And I've also had seasons where I didn't grow as much, and therefore I didn't change my cranks as much. And so, and that's not to say when I was a professional, I also had a weird habit of changing crank lengths. Some of my friends, if you guys are on here, there's a dear friend of mine, Dr. Jason Richardson, a former pro. We grew up together racing, and from an amateur all the way to professional level. And he used to laugh at me that I wouldn't change my gear. However, I would change my cranks, and they found that it was really awkward, and they looked at me funny. And I was always that guy that kind of like mad scientist, and maybe that's probably why I became a coach, just because I always looked at things through a different filter. Like, hey, how can I get faster through my equipment? And then of course I pretty much burned all those options, and then of course I had to get back to the physical performance, and then emotional performance and mental performance. But I think a lot of you guys do like the equipment talk that we're doing. As you may know, a lot on this channel, and especially at our membership over at bmxtraining.com, we do go over a lot of physical, a lot of strategy, a lot of emotional and mental. If you guys know me really well, I love the emotional and mental component because it's everything. But I do have fun with the equipment side of things, and I do tend to get a lot of questions as it pertains to equipment. Hey, how can I get faster through equipment? And I'm not going to lie, I have other hobbies, right? And I love doing video. I'm a professional video editor, really. I am. I do a lot of real estate videos. I do a lot of PSAs, commercials, and whatnot. And we tend to get in the, what is it called? We tend to get in the habit of looking at more gear, right? Camera gear, lenses, lighting, microphones, filters, SD cards, camera bodies. And it's like, well, how can I? And it's like, at the end of the day, it's like, I have this saying, like, I can get the best camera, but the one that I'm using right now, have I surpassed the capacity of utilizing that camera? In other words, if you're a racer, have you surpassed the capacity of the bike? Is the equipment letting you down? And so that's something that you have to think about when it comes to your equipment. Is it hindering you? Is there something that you can change and make you better? Well, are you utilizing and getting everything out of the equipment that you got? Because I see a lot of BMX dads, and I forgive you. It's not that big of a deal. I mean, my hand's raised up with my father. I mean, we spent thousands of dollars trying to upgrade the bike, like upgrading tires and looking at tire widths and lightweight tubes and stacks of gears and different cranks, and man, it can get convoluted. But there's also a some kind of disease of purchasing equipment. I forgot what it is. Let me think about that, and if it pops up, maybe I'll remind you at the end of what that's all about. But where was I going? Basically, at the end of the day, equipment does make a difference, right? And so that's what we're talking about today. We're talking about crank length and how does it make you faster? And so let's jump right into it, shall we? And I would say that, again, we're going to be talking to two different types of parties here. We got guys that are older riders, that are, they're pretty much set in terms of their physical capacity, right? Say after 16, there might be a little bit more growth. There might be some opportunity to maybe go up or go down in terms of crank length. And that's not to say if you're a 45-year-old intermediate and you're looking to optimize your cranks, you could still do that. But I would say at some point when you get older, you get set in a certain crank length, and then you just kind of, run what you brung. You just kind of set it and forget it. And so this is for that group that they might want to experiment with crank length. And so I'm going to give you my personal experience, my take on that. And, that should be fun. And then we have another group, right? We have the parents, right? The parents of younger riders. Majority of our membership base, right, is like a huge amount. Like over 75% of us are parents, and we're parents of 13 and 14 and under, right? A lot of guys under 12. And so we're going to talk about that group as well, because that group is going through different physical changes, right? They're physically evolving, as opposed to the older guys who they've already grown. So we're going to discuss both, right? And I'm going to do my best to kind of toggle between both. Let me get some water here. So let's talk about the pros of going longer. And I want to speak to the younger guys first. And I would say that, well, let's just jump into it. I do my best to prepare, but for the most part, I don't really recite or I don't really prepare all that hard when it comes to this stuff, because I'm just basically tapping into my unconscious competence of my experience. So I don't have anything I write. There's no scripts. It's just, I got a couple bullet points and then we're going to talk about it. Shall we? All right. Thank you. So the pros of going longer on your crank length, right? There's a couple things here. Number one, you get more leverage, meaning it's going to be easier to overcome the inertia out of the gate. Your inertia, okay? I don't want to jump into a whole, science class here, but let me remind you, inertia is overcoming something that's not moving. So in this case, when you're in the gate, something that's not moving is your bike and your body weight. When you have a longer crank, it's going to be easier to move everything, right? And so when it's easier, that means it requires less strength, all right? And I wrote that right there. Less strength required. More leverage and less strength required. Okay, so we know that, right? Let's just talk about this all being equal, that we didn't change the gear, all right? We'll talk about compensating crank length with the gear. But let's just go over the pros and cons of just switching out the cranks and go over each one of them. Okay, so pros: more leverage, less strength required. It's easier for you to overcome inertia. It's easier for you to get on top of the gear. All right, is that fair? Is everyone good on that? Let's talk about the cons of a longer crank, right? There's a second pedal delay. I've noticed that with myself and other riders, there's a second pedal delay because, well, the circle is bigger. And when it's bigger, there's more herky-jerky. There's more body movement going on in the cockpit. When it's a shorter crank, your body's actually not moving as much. When it's a longer crank, your body's going back and forth. It's going like your hips. Your hips are going back and forth in the cockpit. And when I say cockpit, I mean between the handlebar and the seat. Okay, I hope that makes sense. So there tends to be a little bit of delay, and especially with a longer crank, because you get all this leverage and it's like, woo! And it's like, whoa, I'm really forward, and you're almost so forward and you're almost kind of like out of position. So it's just like this wham, and then you don't have the neurological programming the velocity, the muscular velocity to get on top of that second crank right away. Now, that's not to say you couldn't train it. I'm just saying if you were to change your cranks, this is what you're going to experience right off the hop, okay? So we have that second pedal delay. There's a higher RPM demand, right? It's a bigger circle, and like after the first jump, let's say you go, typically that's when we're almost at full speed, right? So come out of the gate, you're still building up speed, heading into the first jump, still accelerating for the most part, right? For most of us. And then right after that first jump, it's like, boom, you're topped out at a high RPM with a longer crank. You're going to require more leg speed to stay on top of the gear to get anything out of that pedal stroke, okay? It's a longer stroke. Things are moving faster, and again, it's like, think of a windmill, right? A windmill's rotating on the outer edge. It's going really fast, high velocity, and then if you were to measure it, say probably close to the hub, it's not going as fast, and that's why. It requires a higher RPM to do that full rotation. A full rotation typically of an average gear, a 4416, is roughly about 15 feet. So regardless, let's say we don't change the gear and you go up in crank length, 2.5 millimeter, 5 millimeter, it's going to require more RPM. Your legs are going to need to go faster. All right. Ground clearance. Let's talk about ground clearance. That's a huge one. So with ground clearance, like, okay, we'll talk to the older guys when it pertains to ground clearance. Let's say you're in the 175s, 177s, 180 range. Now, back in the day when I first turned pro, I was running 185. Some guys were running like 190s. It was crazy. Talk about ground clearance issues. And we were running flat pedals with cages, and they would stick out a little bit more. And so in the corners, we had a bad habit of scraping our pedals, say coming out of a turn. We'd start pedaling too early, and it's like, oh, we caught our pedal, and we would just do that one, and we would crash. And even sometimes, like going over a jump, we'd start pedaling too early, and on the bottom of that stroke, it catches the top of the jump, and it's like, whoa, and you're running out of it as if you were a 100-meter sprinter going over hurdles, and it's just like, whoa, So with a longer crank, the thing is that as it pertains to turning, it's going to be harder. I shouldn't say harder. You're going to have to be a little bit more patient in terms of pedaling out of a corner. Say it's a asphalt corner where you could pedal real aggressively, and let's say you're carving really hard and you want to start getting on it. With a shorter crank, you could probably pedal sooner. So ground clearance, and then we'll talk about the shorter crank and the turns, but I'll save that. But that's in my head. I got that. The longer cranks, it's also going to be like, if let's say you're a younger kid and you're used to pedaling a whole corner, with a longer crank, it's going to be harder as well, because you're going to be chopping, right? Again, it's going to require more RPM, and you're not used to that from a neurological standpoint. All right, I hope I'm making sense. And if you guys have any questions, or if you guys have any experience about the pros and cons of a longer crank, leave a message. Let's chat about it. Let's talk about it. You guys, please, absolutely chat amongst yourself as well. It's not just me and you. We're all one big community trying to help each other. And that's really, truly one of the reasons why I love and do the BMX Coach Live, is I do it to help you guys thrive, experience your potential, and to sustain it. And more importantly, help out the younger and newer riders of our sport. I say this every time, and that's because, well, listen, if everyone quit BMX right now, I would be very lonely. And of course, you would be lonely as well if everyone else quit and you were the only one left. So our sport is better with more participants. So at the same time, not only am I here to help you guys, but I want you to take this information and help out parents and younger riders that are new to our sport, and even the older guys that are newer to our sport. All right, so let's go to the pros of the shorter crank, shall we? All right, but voila, I love that. Nice little transition there. Pros of the shorter cranks. it's going to require lower RPMs. I would say like, after the first jump all the way to the finish line. And hear me out. I love that, because if you're coming off a longer crank and you decide to go shorter, listen, when it comes to younger riders don't typically go shorter unless they get, some bike and it comes pre-installed with some longer cranks, and it's like, hey, those cranks are too long. Let's put on some shorter ones. From there, you start going up. Now, for older guys, sometimes we tend to overthink. My hand's raised up with you. I'm a guy that used to overthink this. And it's like, oh man, like maybe I'll change out my cranks. And I'll talk about how I used to change out my cranks when I was a top amateur and also as a professional. I was crazy like that. Anyways, when it comes to going to a shorter crank as it pertains to an older guy, if you guys have done this, then you guys will know it's nicer. Like after the first jump, it's like, whoa, I don't have to pedal as fast. And I feel like I would say, I call it meat under my feet. You have more meat under your feet, meaning you feel like there's more resistance, and it's like, oh, cool, I have all this resistance. And when you have this resistance and you're used to pedaling faster, then you actually get more out of your pedal stroke, right? You're able to get higher speeds. So with a shorter crank, you're able to get higher speeds because your legs are trained to turn over faster. And with a shorter crank, it doesn't require a high RPM. So it's crazy. You feel like, let's say, after the first jump, typically it's like, let's say for like a transmission gearbox in a car, right? Let's say there's 5 speeds. I would say with a shorter crank, you feel like you're already in, you're like around 4th, 5th gear, and then you're just cruising in that 5th gear highway speed all the way around the track, and it's nice. And you don't feel like you're getting gassed, and you feel like you have good leg speed throughout the entire track, and you're going faster for the same effort. And so that's a really good benefit of a shorter crank. And more ground clearance. So the other thing I really like about a shorter crank, and trust me, I've done this, and you may try this too. The other thing I like about a shorter crank, I've noticed that I can also pedal a little deeper into turns, and I can also pedal sooner out of turns. So my exit speed, my ability to get on top of the gear quicker, because I'm confident that my pedal is going to clear because my cranks are shorter. I'm gonna create more speed. Not only that, but let's say you want to pedal entire turn, you're going to feel like you're going to be able to do it a lot easier, because again, the crank, the requirement of the RPM is lower. Okay, I hope that makes sense. Younger guys, again, I wouldn't say there's probably no benefit of going shorter unless you're a beginning rider and you're chopping a lot. I remember a time when I was coaching beginners and some kid was on a full-size bike, and I went up to the trailer and we got him another bike that fit him and with shorter cranks, and he liked the big bike because it was really comfortable, but it had longer cranks. And so we put him on another bike that was a little bit smaller but had cranks that allowed him to pedal smoother. And when he was able to pedal smoother, he was actually able to control the bike leading up to jumps. And so, that's the other thing with beginners, shorter cranks are actually better because it smooths the rider out. And with beginners, we definitely want to make things as easy as possible, right? So keep that in mind if you guys are out there coaching beginners or helping out beginners, or if you're a beginner. We were all a beginner, and I love being a beginner. I remember when I was a beginner, I think I was on like 175s, and I needed to be more on, I think probably 165s or 170s. I was 8 years old, so definitely needed to be on a shorter crank. All right, so we covered the pros on that. Let's talk about the cons of shorter cranks. There's only one, really. That's the only one I can think of. So if you guys can think of any other ones, it requires more force to come out of the gate. You have less leverage. We're trying to overcome inertia, and so more force. You don't have that leverage. You're going to need to be stronger. For you older guys, especially for you older guys that remember some of the older pros, there was a guy that I used to race by the name of Warwick Stevenson. Even Nick Long. You guys know Nick Long. Nick Long is a 2-time Olympian. I actually coached him. I don't know what size cranks he's on now, but historically, he's always ridden fairly shorter cranks for his size. All right. Nick is about 6'2", 6'3". He's more like 6'2". And he runs 175s. At one point, he was running 172 and a halves. That crank length is more like for like a road bike. That's like more of an endurance crank length for a guy his size. And really, at the end of the day, him being a tall guy, a leverage guy, long arms, long legs, he has all the torque and leverage that he needs. So he can afford to run a shorter crank. And he's strong, right? Elite athletes are typically, I was telling one of my newly winner circle guys that I signed up, we're partners now. We have this program that I coach one-on-one. It's called the Winner Circle. Maybe you guys have seen it. If you guys want any information about it, hit me up. I was telling him that 175s. What were we talking about? Oh no, please forgive me. We were talking about elite strength. Okay, elite athletes across all elite sports. Being an Olympic coach at the Olympic Training Center, I was lucky enough to hang out with other athletes, hang out with other coaches, talk to other coaches in the gym, talk to other awesome athletes in the weight strength training room, and of course the other strength coaches. And learned a lot from those guys. It was a lot of fun. But we've learned and discovered that at the end of the day, elite athletes typically are squatting around 2 to 2.5 times your body weight. And so keep in mind, if you're an elite athlete, you could get away with going a shorter crank and not be too bothered in terms of your timing and your strength in terms of getting on top of the gear when the gate drops. For the rest of us, okay, including myself, because I'm no longer an elite athlete, if I go shorter on the crank, I'm gonna have to compensate somewhere with the gear. We'll talk about gear compensations here in a minute, I promise. But I need more strength. If you're gonna go down for some of us recreational sport BMXers, right, that just do this for fun. I know you guys do it seriously. Doesn't matter if you do it for fun. You guys do. Everyone's that's out there eventually becomes serious about it. The unconscious mind doesn't understand the difference between being a beginner or an Olympic athlete. You guys are all competing at a high level to yourselves. I get it. I know. And so, at the end of the day, for us guys that are not strong, going shorter, we have to think about our ability to get out of the gate, our reaction time, and our power. So. All right, so I hope you guys took some notes on that. If you guys miss out on that, certainly you could replay this. Oh, cool! We got more super chat donations. It looks like we got a Canadian donation from Jean Philippe. Please forgive me if I botched your last name. I know it says Bellinger, but there's a hyphen above the E, so I'll figure out how to pronounce that. Jean-Philippe, thank you so much. I'm grateful. Let me know which digital DVD download you would like. I really appreciate you guys participating in the super chat. We'll get to your questions and make it a priority for sure. But I hope we understand. I hope we're getting an understanding in terms of crank length here. Let me get a drink of water. Check it out. I got my my Boss shirt on today. This was my very first. I have to come up. You like that? I'll look weird. U.S. Boss, based out of Oakland, California, in NorCal. This was my very first factory sponsor, and I got a factory sponsor. I started racing at 8, and I actually was good enough to get a factory sponsor by the age of 11. Very, very historical brand. It was like the Bad News Bears. We were like the Bad News Bears. Lots of talent. And then what would happen was bigger teams with bigger budgets like GT, Hutch, 09. I don't know if you guys know any of those names. Free Agent. They would steal all our top talent. We were a factory team, but it was like they treated us like a AAA farm team. Like there was a mastermind by the name of Carlo Lucia, and just a master welder. He just understood how he was like Gary Turner of GT. Gary Turner of GT, he was into, I believe he was into building cars and this guy that owned Boss, he was into building flat track motorcycles. And yeah, anyways, long story short, awesome team. He was a team manager. He had a way of spotting talent, developing that talent, and then but the problem was he didn't really have the big budget, and then big teams would just scoop up the top talent and break our team apart. But if you guys know about this brand, really, really historical brand, and I got this shirt. The new guys that took over Boss are doing a lot of cool retro stuff. So really proud of being part of Boss. I digress. So we're talking about crank length. So I hope you guys understand it. At the end of the day, if you guys are going to change cranks, keep in mind, more importantly, you have to consider the gear ratio, right? So, and we're not going to overthink it. If you're a younger rider and you go up in crank length, let's say you go up 5 millimeters, because the cranks are too short, and everyone's saying, oh, the cranks are too short. You go with a longer crank. Try that out before you jump up in gear, before you bump the gear up. See what that feels like. Maybe go out there and practice. See what it feels like to come out of the gate just by increasing the crank length. And if you feel like you're spun out at some point, maybe you feel really good and you're competing all the way to the first jump and you're just slightly spun out right before the first turn. Well, you could train that by doing maximum speed efforts and get used to the high RPM demand of a longer crank. Right? So you could train your body. The body's amazing, man. You could train it. If you could follow directions, certainly you could teach the body to adapt. So keep in mind, you could still get away with bumping up the crank length and not changing the gear. However, most people, physiologically and neurologically speaking, it's hard to adapt right off the hop. So people get impatient and they just bump the gear up as they go up in crank length. And there's no shame in doing that. So if you're going to do that, I would say, start anywhere from, a quarter to a half a tooth bump. I'm talking gear inches, not rollout, gear inches. So you could do that through decimal gearing by Renan. You could do that by changing the rear tire. In terms of gear changes, go back to last week's episode where we talked about gear changing. That was a real fun one. And of course, on the contrary, if we go shorter in crank length, then we also want to consider going down in gear, right? Going down in gear ratio, because that gear is going to feel heavier. It's going to feel harder. You're going to have to overcome more inertia out of the gate. And so you might want to consider making the gear a little bit easier, right? Okay, so if you guys have any questions about gears, ask them in the chat, in the super chat here. We'll get to that. Hope that makes sense. We're doing pretty good on time. 6:03. I think we spent about 20 minutes over here of me talking about gears. Talking about crank lengths and the pros and cons and what to do if you were to change it and whatnot. Now, here's the thing. I was going to talk about how when I was a pro and I changed my gear, I changed my cranks at the track. I'm older guy, I'm done growing, and, I'm around 5'10", and I would say I have a short inseam, really long torso. And it's easy for me with that configuration to build a lot of strength, especially in the squat rack, right? Because there's less stress and less fulcrum on the lower back, but that's a whole nother conversation. Longer cranks for me actually felt pretty good, despite the fact that I had a shorter inseam. I didn't mind it. I can get away with running 185s, but it's funny. For the longest time in my pro career, I remember I was running 185s and with a 45-16, and that was the standard gearing at the time. But it was weird. I could get out with everybody, but I would just fade away. Like after the 30-foot mark, right before the first jump, guys were just pulling me. And really, if I would have done more training, more sprint training, right, more speed work, then I wouldn't have had to get in my head and start changing my crank lengths, because that's exactly what I did. I was like, well, dude, I'm getting dropped, after the 30-foot mark. Let's go with a shorter crank length and see how that works. So going from 185s to 180s, that's a big change. And even if I changed the gear, it still felt awkward because of regardless if I changed my gear and made it easier, it still felt hard. The leverage wasn't there. And so I found a happy medium. I went with 182s, and that's how I kind of discovered the ideal crank length. I would say sometimes you have to make those investments, right? I was lucky I was sponsored, so I was able to say, hey, send me some 180s and some 182s. Okay, Greg, well, okay. Are you going to use them? Yes. Okay, well, whatever you don't use, send it back. And sometimes I would send it back, or sometimes I didn't. And I don't know. That's pretty funny. But if you guys are like, maybe if you have if you have the opportunity to borrow cranks, and you want to go 5 millimeters higher, 5 millimeters lower, I think it's okay for you guys to find out. Because at the end of the day, you go on like any of these websites that are going to give you a generic determination of what your ideal crank length is. Listen, I don't really go by those. I think each individual athlete, once you become tenured in the sport, tenured meaning you've been in the sport a long time. We're talking about older riders here, not younger ones. Been in the sport a long time and want to tinker with your cranks, go ahead and do that. And then, the good news is that today there's a lot of differences. There's a lot of different crank sizes in 2.5 millimeter increments, which is really nice. So go back and forth, tinker with it, figure it out, find what's really comfortable. And I would say, when people always ask me, hey, what's the ideal crank length? And so for me, the way I was thinking about it, it's like, well, dude, I want a good gate, because in the pro class, if I don't get a good gate, you can forget it. The race is over. It's so hard to race from behind in the pro class. So basing my crank length, I need a good gate. I want a good spin down the first straight, but I also need really good, leg speed to where I don't feel like I'm getting choppy from the first turn, from the second turn, especially all the way to down the last straight. I don't want to be chopping down the last straight. So 185s were too long. 180s were too short. I couldn't get out of the gate. 185s were too long. I felt like I was chopping on the second half of the track and I was getting dropped. So I found that 182s, I went right in the middle, right? Not too hot, not too cold, just right. And that's how I discovered my ideal crank length. Seriously, I found 182s were the best. Now, don't get me wrong. I've had weekends where it's like, man, I'm not really feeling my 182s. I feel like I need 185s. And I put 185s on because I was head tripping and I was able to get out of the gate and compete. And, but then maybe Sunday I was like, you know what? I don't really like the way the 185s went. So I went down the 182s, went back to what I was running. And so, I would do that from time to time. It was kind of goofy and I wouldn't even change the gear. For you younger riders, I think it's important for you to, number one, you have to, your development physically needs to exceed the equipment. Meaning, are you training? Okay, you're growing and the crank is feeling shorter, right? Are you still getting stronger in an effort to get out of the gate and get on top of that gear? Good. If you're still doing that and the crank still feel too short, then that's when it's time to go up and make the crank longer. Hope that makes sense, guys. All right, so we got some action here in chat. Hopefully I'm seeing all the questions coming in. All right. Please forgive me. I do need to take a break. I'll be back in a second. I got to go to the bathroom. Hey guys, I have a question. What would it do for you if you could enhance your power out of the gate, enhance your sprint speed down the first straight, enhance your skills, enhance your mental performance mind state? What would that do for your racing or your kids' racing? If you're seeing the value of enhancing your BMX performance, consider joining the community of BMX Training Pro and get the same access my Olympic athletes have enjoyed, as well as thousands of BMXers all over the world. Some members use the access to improve their gate start techniques. Some also use the access to keep them motivated to train, and you'll find your reason when you gain access and join BMX Training Pro today. All right, I just made it back from the bathroom. Please forgive me if you guys were wondering where the feed went. I don't know how long that took, but all right, let's go to some questions. We got the super chat going. Oh, before we do that, we have to do this.
Stay focused, get ready now. For real, get ready now.
Nitro with the nice flow.
Stay focused, get ready now. For real, get ready now. Let's go. Stay focused, here the heat come. Concentrate to the sound of the beat drum. Yeah. Start it up, take it back now. Check it out. This is how it's going down. Yeah.
All right, guys, welcome back. All right, let's go to the questions. We have, I don't know, looks like we have probably 19 minutes and then I have to go. I have dinner reservations on a Monday. I'm spending all day trying to prepare the studio, and I'm not cooking dinner tonight. So we got dinner reservations, and you know, it's COVID. So anyways, let's go to some questions. All right, so looks like David Burt, thank you so much. I'm grateful for your donation in the super chat, $5. Awesome. Let's go to David. David says, hey, what's going on, Greg? Love all the content you have. Any advice for a rider that used to be expert and took like 12 years off, laugh out loud, trying to get back into BMX, not racing, just to have a good time? Any advice? Yeah, man, if you took 12 years off, I would say there's a couple of things you want to do to have fun. Number one, I would still say at the end of the day, listen, you know, BMX is so demanding on the body. And so you still need to be in track riding shape. There's pumping and jumping and manualing. And so, you know, go out there and work on just general fitness to get around the track. Work on your pumping skills. Start getting back into manualing. If you used to and love jumping, please forgive me, I'm presupposing that maybe you have jumped. You know, then start working on your jumping. But I would do it in that order, right? Work on your ability to just navigate the track, because pumping is a really big demand. One thing I've noticed, David, is that, you know, when I'm riding my road bike a lot, I do that a lot. And if I haven't been out in the track in a long time, you know, I'm talking a long time, you know, it could be anything over 4 weeks. That seems like a long time to a BMXer. But if I haven't been out in the track in a long time, especially, you know, during COVID, right? Like a lot of guys just couldn't get to the track. When you get out there, it's kind of like, whoa, like you get this BMX track leg load, right? And so work on your ability to adapt to the leg loading demand in BMX. And that makes it a lot funner, right? Because your goal is to have fun, but physically you need to kind of put in the work so that you have the energy and you have the ability to have fun. And when you have the energy and you have the ability, then you're able to focus. And when you're able to focus, then you're having fun. And I didn't want to give you a negative focus, but at the end of the day, the number one reason I'm saying this, that you want to work on that fitness, is that you don't want to get out of shape on the track and crash, right? Because that's not fun. So let's focus on getting in shape, track shape. And when you're in track shape, you have fun. Thank you so much, David. Let me know what digital DVD download you would like. Thank you so much for your donation in the super chat. I'm very grateful. Thank you so much. All right, well, it looks like we have another super chat question coming in from Jean-Philippe. $20 Canadian. Wow, man, that's a big one. Thank you so much. I don't even know if he has a question in here. He just donated. I remember Jean-Philippe from last week. He asked and participated. So, Jean, if you have any questions, let me know. I'm happy to answer them. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the donation. I'm humbled, really, truly. Thank you. All right, so, yeah. What else do we have here? Brian says, when you race for LNS, your cranks was 185. You ran 42.14. Brian, I don't know who you are, because what's your last name, man? And you don't have an avatar. Thank you. You're correct. Pretty close. I actually ran more like a 41.14. I think that was my go-to. I don't even know what the math is on that, but it's pretty darn hard, right? 41.14 is probably close to like, I don't know, like a 46 and a half. It's up there. Certainly it's not like David Milham, who ran 185s with a 45.14. Anyone remember him? All right, Jacob James says 40, 18, 175 millimeter, want to get back to stock cruiser settings of 41, 18, 180. Do I do this without swelling up my knees and shocking my joints? I'm running clips 47. So you're an older dude. Thank you, Coach G. Let me reread this question so I understand it clearly. So you want to go up with a longer crank. Well, I would say, at the end of the day, for what purpose do you want to go up 5 millimeters, right? So is the shorter crank, are you not getting out of the gate with that? Maybe again, we talk about trying to exhaust everything physically, even mechanically, right? Like, are your gate starts good to get on top of the gear? For what purpose do you want to go up in crank length? Do you want the gear to feel easier? What if we just made the gear easier? So we don't always have to change our cranks. But for what purpose would you like to do that? I would like to know. Now, Jacob, another thing that you could do is maybe consider borrowing some 180s and see what it feels like. But then again, you're talking about 5 millimeter bigger circle, your knees are going to swell. I don't know, man. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. How do you know that your knees will swell with a longer crank length? I'm curious. Magic Maple says, hey man, how you doing? Let's see here. Jake Jensen 218. Thanks for chiming in, Jake. I appreciate you. I'm going to go up a gear this week from a 44/16 to a 45/16. Would I benefit from a longer crank? What crank length are you on right now? At the end of the day, I'm not sure. I'm not sure if that's the right answer in going up in a longer crank. At the end of the day, you need to put the 45 on and see how you respond to it. At the end of the day, when you put that bigger gear on, physiologically, for most riders, it tends to be a little bit of a shock, especially coming out of the gate. It's like, whoa, I'm not used to getting on top of this gear. It's really heavy. It feels harder. I need more strength. It's not like you don't have the strength. It's just neurologically, you're used to a certain gear and you've adapted to that. So in an effort to get used to the 45, you just need to do repetitions out of the gate. If you're a younger guy, again, we spoke about younger kids going up in crank length as they grow. If you're a guy that's growing, then maybe perhaps that would be a reason why you would go longer. Now, if you are going up in gear, I'm curious to know as to what purpose, what's the intent of you making the gear harder? Is the 44 feeling easier? And if the 44 is feeling easier, are you doing the work to make it, to adapt? Are you doing the work to adapt? Are you doing your speed work? Are you doing sprints? Are you doing high-end leg speed work to ensure that 44 feels really good? Now, if you've done all that and you just simply want a bigger gear to go faster versus the rest of the class, then by all means, put the bigger gear on. I've done that. I think last week I spoke about how my competitor, Christophe Levesque, ran a 44/16 everywhere, downhill, X Games, it didn't matter, and so, rodeo, flat, out of the gate, right? Or NBL, big downhill NBL back east track, right? Classic. And so I would run a bigger gear for the strategy and tactic of being able to compete with him down the last straight. That was the only reason why I put a bigger gear on. And we actually both ran the same crank length. He ran 182s, I ran 182s, he ran a 44, I ran a 45. So what I did was I had to make sure I was strong enough to get on top of the 45. So if you're going to go up in gear, make sure you're strong enough, or make sure that you adapt and do the work, do flat ground sprints and get used to it. I'm not sure if going up in a longer crank just yet would benefit. And I would say if you do, again, I love 2.5 millimeter increment jumps. 5 millimeters, believe it or not, it's like, oh, well, it's only 5 millimeters. It's a big jump. And if you think about it, 5 millimeters, it's more like 10 millimeters because you have to think about the entirety of the circle, right? So if you go 5 millimeters, Okay, the bottom crank goes 5 millimeters to the bottom. The top crank is 5 millimeters at the top. That's 10 millimeters of a difference. If you do a 2.5 millimeter jump, that's only a 5 millimeter full circle difference. Okay, I hope that makes sense. So I like 2.5 millimeters. And this is not a plug. I really love Renan Design. My good friend George Costa has made for younger riders adjustable cranks. I think they retail around $300. Such an awesome tool to optimize and figure out what the ideal crank length is for your younger rider. If they made those for an older guy, that would be awesome. I'd be all over it. I would be changing my crank length by like 1 millimeter lengths. When I was on this team, boss, our team manager and the guy that actually did the welding and all the designing of the parts, he did everything. He was a fabricator, welder, designer, team manager, chef, and dishwasher. But he actually made cranks in 181 millimeter lengths, which was pretty cool. Just a little bit. That little bit makes a big difference. I think Kasten back in the day, they made 181s as well. For all you old school guys that are chiming in, you guys would know. Jake James says, I'm on 175. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, maybe try out 177s, Jake. I mean, I run 177s with what's the gearing? Like a 44.1 decimal gear. 44.1 decimal gear with 177 and a halves. Being where I am today, that was my last setup at the 2017 Worlds was the last race I did on a BMX bike. I was on 177s with a 44.1 decimal gear. I love 177 and a halves. It's weird. I could never adapt to 180s. It was either my spectrum was either 177 and a halves or 182s. I couldn't really go from 175s to 180s. I was that odd weird guy. Jake says, I'm getting the gear tomorrow. Going to do sprints track this week. Local track, state finals. Jake, I'm still curious. What's the intent of you going up in tooth? I would really love to know. Really love to know. All right. Well, we're doing pretty good. Looks like I have about 7 more minutes. So if there's any more questions coming in, please ask them. For those that have participated in the super chat, thank you so much. I think we're going to do some kind of like membership badge in YouTube. Again, I'm committed. It's non-negotiable. I'm doing this every Monday, 5:30 Pacific Standard Time. I'm going to be here for you. I do plan on going vacation. I think we're thinking about going to Sedona, Arizona, checking out the Vortex hot springs and the powerful spiritual nature of Sedona, the Arizona desert. And if it's Monday, I'm still going to break out the laptop and we'll do a live, but I think we're going to we're shooting more for like a Tuesday to Saturday, but if we leave on a Thursday, we might be coming home on a Monday. Either way, even if I'm in the car and I'm a passenger, I'm going to break out the phone. I'll go live with you guys on YouTube for sure. I'm committed. It's a non-negotiable. All right, we have a couple more questions coming in. Thank you so much. Again, guys, I'm so grateful for the opportunity to be your coach. Let's see here. Magic Maple. I love that. Are you Canadian, Magic Maple? I love maple syrup, especially the real deal stuff. Hey, my dad used to race before people liked clips, but he hasn't raced in a while, and he says I shouldn't use clips because he didn't what do I do? Because he didn't. Okay, I see what he's saying. He doesn't want you to race on clips because he didn't race on clips. That's great. You know what that's called? Perception is projection, right? His model of the world's a little bit, you got to tell him, hey man, the map is not the territory. The map is not the territory. And you respect his model of the world, and maybe you say something like this, yeah, I understand that you didn't race on clips and you race on flats. And there are many guys that are your age that used to race that are finding that clips are more beneficial. Show them this video. I mean, straight up, I'm older and I got a scar on my lip from racing on flat pedals, and I slipped my pedal right before a tabletop going in the first turn at a world championship race in Burbank. and I smashed my face. I slipped my pedal, and I couldn't do anything without it. I couldn't do anything about it. I love clips, by the way, but that's for racing, right? That's for racing. And so for what purpose does he think that clips won't be useful, right? How does he know that clips are not useful? Sure, certainly flat pedals are useful. I think they're useful in terms of developing specific strength when it comes to sprint training, developing skills as it pertains on the track. Absolutely, for sure. It'll teach you how to bunny hop properly and whatnot. But I'm an advocate of clips, right? If your skills are developed, I have no problems with anyone using clips. Oh man, that's funny. Mike Fernandez, Greg, a 5mm increase in crank arm length is an increase of 15.7 in circumference, the circle you have to spin. Oh, is that right? Huh? I learned something new. Thank you so much, Mike, for sharing that with the community. I'll look into that. I wonder why that is. I'm curious to know how the math is, because I guess in my mind I'm thinking 5mm increase. Again, 5mm at the bottom, 5mm at the top. It's an increase of 10mm, but you're coming up with an extra 5.7 somehow, some way. That's pretty cool. I'm interested to know. Curious. Jake Jensen, at my past couple races, I have been spinning out at the end of the first straight at a couple of different tracks. Okay, that's why you're going up in gear. Jake, let me ask you something. Are you doing top end leg speed work? Are you doing maximum sprints? Are you, like for me, I remember I had that problem when I started racing back up again and wanted to prepare for the 2017 World Championships. I took 7 years off prior, but I was coming off a road bike, and on a road bike, I'm only spinning at 100 RPM, and with a BMX bike, we get up there, right? We're up in the 170, 180 RPM range, and so I worked on longer sprints, man. I actually went to a local downhill sprint section over here in Torrey Pines, over here in San Diego, California, and I actually lengthened my sprint. I went 30 full crank lengths and just spun out. Have you tried doing that, Jake? Make sure you explore all your options, because you're going to find that 45. You may not find the 45 to be too hard coming out of the gate. Maybe you are strong enough. Again, put the 45 on. I say do it. If I was your coach, put the 45 on. Do some flat ground sprints, do some gates, neurologically, mentally, just tell yourself physically you're able to adapt and you have what it takes to get on top of the gear, and just start getting out as fast as you can with that bigger gear, because it's going to be a wake-up call. All right, cool. All right, we have one more question coming in through the super chat. Again, thank you guys so much. I'm so honored and grateful to be your guys' coach. Louise says, I'm running a cruiser and use a 180mm 4218. That sounds about right. That's pretty much a standard. That's what our fellow Jacob James was talking about over here. And he says, I like it a lot. But a lot of friends use a gearing different. Yeah, well, that's the thing. Especially today, there's so many different ways to configure your race gear. At the end of the day, BMX, man, it's a power sport. And so this is where the physical coach of me comes. Not the equipment coach, but the physical coach. I'm going to put my physical coach hat on. Ready? Are we doing our strength work? Are we doing our sprints? Are we working on our ability to overcome inertia out of the gate? Meaning, are we strong enough to overcome energy that's not moving, or rather just still energy, right? Overcoming our body weight, overcoming our bike weight. Are we doing the things to come out of the gate? Are we working on our power acceleration? Are we doing the sprint work? Are we working on our top end leg speed? Are we working on our speed endurance? Our speed endurance is like, from the first turn all the way to the finish line, being able to combat metabolic waste. Are we able to get to the finish line without our legs burning? If we're able to do all those things, okay, we're doing all the work, right? I'll go through the list again. Doing our strength work, doing our stand start sprint work, overcome inertia work? Are we doing acceleration work? Are we working on our top end leg speed? Are we working on our speed endurance? If we're hitting all those components and the gearing you have on is way different than the competition, then that's when you should consider trying and changing the gear. Because I was doing all those things when I was racing my formidable foe, Christophe Levesque. He was running a 44-16 everywhere with 182 cranks. I was going through everything, right? I started banging my head against the wall. 185s, 180s, 44, 45. And at some point, I discovered that 182s was the ideal crank length. I'm going to stick with that. And, okay, am I doing everything? Am I doing the strength work? Am I going to the gym? Am I doing plyometric work? Am I doing sprint work? Am I doing my top end leg speed work? Am I doing my fitness work? If I'm doing all those things, then that's what I'm going to go ahead and figure out the most optimal gear, and then set it and forget it and commit to that, and then start working on the mentals and emotional mental. There's lots of different things. That's the beauty of BMX, right? Between the equipment, between the gears, the cranks, the tire sizes, the size of our bikes, the weight of our bikes. There's so many different things. You also have the physical component, the emotional component. Do you have the emotional fitness and the mental component? Do you have the emotional fitness? Okay. And then you have the equipment. So then we have the training, physical training. So there's so many things. That's the beauty of it. So I just want to make sure, Louise, that you're exhausting everything from a training standpoint, right? And if you're not sure about the training, let me know if it's the first straight. Let me know if it's track speed. Go to bmxtraining.com. There is a 2-day free trial. Sneak in there, take a look. I do have plans in there if you don't have a physical plan. And these plans will, listen, if you can follow directions easily, follow the directions, give it a month and see where you stand physically. I want you to exhaust all the physical components as you can, right? The strength work, the power work, the speed work, and see where you stand using the same equipment. If you're exhausting all those things, then that's when you can start tweaking the equipment a little bit here and there. All right, hope that makes sense. All right, I have to answer this question. My man, Jason Chang, he's from Hawaii, a good friend of mine. Jason's been to one of my Faster First Straight camps in Las Vegas. He's a legend. Jason Chang says, so how did you decide on 177s for the Worlds versus something longer? Yeah, so, man, I would say around the early 2000s, there was a funny trend. Oh, man, this is funny. I don't know if I should be embarrassed of this, but there was a funny trend of these younger riders. I was an older pro. There was these younger riders coming in, and everyone was starting to clip in. Again, this was like around 2000 and 2002, and clips were just now becoming, clips were the preeminent pedal to use, straight up. If you weren't clipped in, it was going to be hard for you to keep up. I think I was one of the last guys to actually cross over from flats to clips. I was just kind of like stuck in some weird headspace of like, I was really stubborn, I would say, about crossing over to clips, and I was trying to make it a point. But there was a race where I actually was the last guy. I was the only guy in the main event with flat pedals, and I got beat, and I kind of conceded. I was like, you know what, maybe it's time for me to go to clips, and so I did. And so right after that, shortly, there was a bunch of younger pros coming in, and there was this trend that, hey, you know what, we're clipping in, and when we were clipping in, the cranks felt really long for some reason. So there was a trend of going down in crank length. So I went down from 182s to 180s. I was like, I don't like 180s. Like, let me see if 175s work. And I tried racing on 175s, and they just felt way too short. So I was like, well, what can I do? Maybe I race a 43 with 175s, and it was just awkward. I just felt like the precision of me having to get out of the gate and it felt like there was a small window of opportunity for me to deliver my power band efficiently through shorter cranks and a smaller gear. If I missed it, if I went too fast, I would hit the gate. If I went too slow, I just missed it, right? And so I felt like with a longer crank and a little bit higher gear, if I came out a little bit late, I felt like I was okay. For some reason, it was really weird. Like the shorter crank, it just didn't work out with me. So I went from 175s. I kind of bumped it up. I was like, let me try 177 and a halves, and I fell in love with it. It felt just right. That was like my new just right. Right? I reconfigured. So that's how I found 177 and a halves. And of course, with more riders being fit in the everyone's training today now we're in the 2020s, but in the 2010s, everyone was fit at the 2017 Worlds, man. I was 42 racing guys that were 35 years old. I think I was the oldest guy that made the main, and the average age of the guys that made that main event was 36. I was 7 years older than everybody of the median age, and these guys were in shape, man. These guys were, I just felt like with a longer crank, I just didn't have the endurance. I didn't, like my body type, I'm really super fast twitch. Like I would sprint a guy like Jason Richardson on foot. I could beat him on foot. Like we're doing a running sprint. I would beat him off the line. First two strokes running, and he would just reel me in so quick. So that being said, a longer crank, I didn't need a longer crank. I was able to get out fast. So actually a shorter crank, a shorter one versus everyone else was going to work out with me because I had the strength and the fast twitch to get on top of a shorter crank. And also being more fast twitch dominant, I don't want to get too tech here, but basically I would burn up so much metabolic waste. I felt like my legs were loading so fast after the first turn. So I felt like with a shorter crank, I had more meat underneath my feet. I felt like I had a little bit more power endurance with a shorter crank. And so that was my rationale going with a shorter crank as I got older. I hope that makes sense. Jacob James, Greg, he says, will you have any Turbulence DVD available soon? The answer is no on that. That has been discontinued. I've actually have not been able to replicate any new DVDs. Mainly because there's not a big demand for it anymore. So, if I find one, how about if I find a used one, I'll send it over to you. So email me info@bmxtraining.com. If not, we definitely have digital versions of that. And, again, if you guys, we're starting the super chat thing. So if you guys donate to the channel, you guys are getting a free digital DVD download of your choice. They retail for $30 each. If you guys donate during this, I will give you guys a digital download. I thank you so much for the donations. A couple of you guys donated, man. I'm really I'm humbled. It's crazy. Cool. Brian says, Greg, thanks for the videos. Magic Maple says, my dad says it's more dangerous for me to ride cranks. Did you mean clips? It's more dangerous for you to ride clips? Yeah, maybe. I don't know. Is that what you're saying? Yeah, BMX is dangerous, period, right? So, I mean, I've had worse accidents riding with flat pedals by slipping my pedal. So, to each his own. All right, guys. Thanks again so much. It's 6:39. I went 9 minutes over. Let's chat on Monday. Next Monday, 5:30 Pacific Standard Time. I still see some questions coming in. Again, I'm so grateful for the opportunity to be your coach. Thank you so much for joining me here at BMX Coach Live. And I'll see you guys at the races. You guys have a great week. Keep training, keep working hard, exhaust all the physical capacities as it pertains to training and preparation. If you guys need any help, check out my membership over at bmxtraining.com, and I'll see you guys at the races. Hey guys, I have a question. What would it do for you if you could enhance your power out of the gate, enhance your sprint speed down the first straight, enhance your skills, enhance your mental performance mind state? What would that do for your racing or your kids' racing? If you're seeing the value of enhancing your BMX performance, consider joining the community of BMX Training Pro and get the same access my Olympic athletes have enjoyed, as well as thousands of BMXers all over the world. Some members use the access to improve their gate start techniques. Some also use the access to keep them motivated to train, and you'll find your reason when you gain access and join BMX Training Pro today.